Hello and welcome back to another Q&A. So I thought it's about time that I did one of these, and I've actually got some really interesting questions for this week's Q&A. Now, before I completely get into that, I just want to quickly mention that the reason why the sort of rate of content has decreased a little bit recently is kind of twofold. First of all, the patch 6.2 PTR right now, it's a tad bland, waiting for some things to be fleshed out and some more content to be added. But also, it's coming up to the end of third year of university, which means lots of big projects, which have been ongoing for a while, but it's kind of entering the crunch period. That should all be cleared up within 3 weeks, though, and we should be back to a more normal schedule where I can put a lot more time into videos after that's done. And yes, for those of you who ask, that will probably include more lore videos. Anyway, let's get on to the questions. So Devixa asked, do you think that they will do a time travel expansion or patch? Basically, the infinite dragonflight at some point. I think it's a good question, and to directly answer the question, I think they probably will at some time, yes, but my guess is really as good as anyone else's when it comes to that. Though certainly they have shown recently that they're not particularly scared about doing anything time travel related. I mean, Warlords of Draenor is an alternate universe, or an alternate timeline. You have the Timeless Isle weirdness going on, so they're comfortable enough with time being involved in their storylines. That does not mean they always get the time travel right, or they don't screw their own lore up with it, but it's an idea that they are comfortable with. And that leads us on to the Caverns of Time. The Caverns of Time, in my opinion, is a fantastic idea, and I still remember looking at the old box of the Burning Crusade and seeing the Caverns of Time plastered in the back as one of the main features. And to this day, I still think it is one of the just really best ideas for allowing players to explore stuff that normally would not make sense within the game, and I think right now it's a little bit underused. It has not been used since Cataclysm, so there was nothing in MoP, and so far nothing in Warlords of Draenor, and I'm going to be honest, like, if 6.2 doesn't have dungeons in it, like, I doubt that they would put dungeons in, if there was to be a third raid tier, and then, you know, them quickly moving on to the next expansion within 6 or 7 months, which is what they said. I don't think that if that was their plan, they would do 3 dungeons, because those 3 dungeons would only last a few months, and then they would quite literally be made irrelevant by a new expansion. So I don't think we're going to get any this expansion. We didn't get any in the last expansion, and that is a little bit of a pity, because it's just so damn cool. You see, there's a lot of really nice stuff that went on in the extended universe. Well, actually, in the extended universe, like the novels and the manga and stuff like that, but also in the older Warcraft games. Some of that stuff could be relived in a really exciting and just interesting manner. For an example, we had the Culling of Stratholme, which was, as much as the RP event got tiring after a while, I think a bit of fun, and certainly it was a way to see a cool event and actually see some story stuff unfold. They could do that with loads and loads of different events. Hell, we even had the Battle at Mount Hyjal, one of the like really major lore events, be done using the Caverns of Time. So it really is something that they should do, because the great thing is it can just pop up in a patch, and they don't really need a overarching plot reason to do it. It can literally just be a bit of content. Or I think what they probably could do, and maybe should do, is have a bit of a kind of long-running plot thread about the infinite dragonflight and those time travel or just, you know, time manipulation related problems. Specifically not something that is kind of, you know, about to end the universe or anything as major as that, but something that they can tap into now and then, you know, every few patches when they feel like, yeah, it's maybe time to add in a new dungeon or something like that. Now, if they were to go with that idea of having a overarching plot thread that just, you know, dip in and out of, what they could do after building it up for a little bit of time is move on to actually having a full raid tier. I think that could be really interesting. As long as it's built up to right, it doesn't feel completely out of the blue for being a raid tier, and, well, sometimes those little aside raid tiers that are a bit different, you know, a little bit off the beaten path, I think can be really good. Finally, as far as, like, a full-blown expansion goes, I really would not like that. I think Warlords of Draenor, you know, it's had pretty decent storytelling, but its lore hasn't been of that much significance. I think that due to the fact it has got that time travel stuff going on, and that it is technically an alternate universe, maybe it leads to it not having as much impact, or perhaps not driving forward the Warcraft universe as a whole. With Draenor, I think it might feel like we will have just popped through the Dark Portal, then popped back out of the Dark Portal, and nothing at home will have really changed. It's kind of not a major Azeroth-wide event, it's just a little aside, which is fine, and I think they, on a story front anyway, are doing an okay-ish job, even if the lore is not particularly groundbreaking. But, you know, a time travel, like fully time travel expansion, I think it would just suffer from that too much. And also the concept, I think, would just kind of get to people. So I don't really want a full-on expansion, though it could be the odd patch, it could be the odd dungeon, and I'm absolutely down for more Caverns of Time shenanigans. Now that we've covered that question, let's talk a little bit about PvP and PvE. This does not come from any one person, no, loads and loads of people ask this, and essentially a lot of people were talking about the idea of splitting the class balance between PvP and PvE. The main reason why this question came up is because Halinka, who is one of, I think he's the lead PvP guy over at Blizzard, of course it's generally collaborative effort, but he's kind of the figurehead, so to speak. Basically, he recently said in a Q&A that they would not be splitting the abilities between PvP and PvE because it feels a little bit too contrived, and to a lot of players they would sort of wonder, well, why does this ability not work like it normally does when I move over to this kind of content? Which I think is a fair concern, and you know what? I do think it's a very clunky way of doing it, just having a complete binary where it, you know, completely different tooltip. I don't think that would be particularly great for World of Warcraft either. In that Q&A, he did say that they're working on something, which is exciting, and maybe we'll hear about it in the future, but I don't exactly have a lot of benefit of the doubt to give to the Blizzard developers at the minute, given, you know, the fact that a lot of the things they say in interviews don't really come to pass. But if he does indeed have a really cool and interesting sort of, like, intelligent, kind of clever, nifty way of solving this problem, then I'm absolutely all for hearing it. But as for this idea of having a split, which is most of what the questions were asked, I think it could be done subtly in a way that allows for decent enough balance tweaking. I think the very important thing is that abilities, like, in terms of their mechanics, feel identical between the various different, you know, PvE and PvP bits of content. It doesn't make sense that if one ability does something in a raid, that it does something completely different in a, like, in an arena. That's, I think, should be pretty obvious to everyone. Generally, I'd say that they should keep the abilities being roughly the same, but the only thing that they should do is perhaps tweak up the damage numbers a little bit differently based on everything. I'd say that in PvP, the numbers definitely do feel very different already, and if they were to tweak abilities a little bit specifically in PvP combat, I can't see me really noticing that much, as long as the overall priorities and things like that are not changed within a spec. So, for an example, if you have, I don't know, I'm just going to say Mortal Strike, I've got no idea what its balance is like, but let's just say they want to tone down the damage of Mortal Strike a little bit, but it's really well balanced for PvE, which, oddly enough, I don't think it is, but just say that's the case, right? Well, right now, they would, they'd buff it or nerf it, and it would affect both bits of gameplay. I'd say that doing a small nerf to, say, just the PvP damage wouldn't really be a completely crazy thing to do, and for the vast majority of players, they would not notice something like that at all. It just would not really register, and the people who would notice would be the people who are paying attention to the news websites, who are actually able to, process that information and deal with the fact that there's a little bit of, things going on here under the hood. I almost think that Blizzard are scared of doing something like that because A, it would feel very gamey having this sort of weird artificial split in abilities, but also that it would lead to player confusion and various different things like that. What I would say is that if you actually have a split, so in PvP it maybe does 10% less or more damage than in PvE or whatever, if you have that under the hood, you still of course show it in the advanced tooltip, but if you have that and implement it in such a way that it actually does not change rotations and it does not change gameplay, then you should be okay. Now that is actually quite a tall order, because if you choose, one ability, then maybe a certain set of talents will favor that ability. Yeah, things like that may happen, but I'd say for the vast majority of players, as long as their kind of core rotation and core priority system is not changed by sort of PvP specific balancing when in PvP, or, vice versa, then it should be okay. Right now, we've got a situation where making something balanced in PvP could ruin the balance of a class in PvE, and of course the opposite still applies. Well, you could completely eliminate that problem by balancing them separately, and if you balance them separately in a subtle enough manner, then your priority in PvP will probably not change that much. Same goes for PvE, and really there won't be much of an effect other than slightly different numbers that will not really lead to much of a perceptible gameplay difference if they actually do it well. So yeah, I do think they should do that. And there are a few abilities which are different in PvP due to their nature. There are some things which would just completely break PvP combat if they were the same as they are in PvE. So it's definitely good that those things do have splits, but maybe for those main damaging abilities or things like that, if what they need is raw damage balancing, maybe they could do something like that. Honestly, I'm not that well acquainted with PvP. I really do want to be. After I'm done with all this university stuff, I completely plan on hopping in on my warrior and just wrecking stuff. It seems like a lot of fun. So I'll hopefully be able to bring you more informed PvP opinions. This is more just based on kind of what I hear in the grapevine, you know, reading forums, MMO Champion, and just general stuff like that. Certainly, they've got a lot of work to do. Hopefully, Helinka's magic solution is actually a very good one. It seemed like he was pretty excited about it, so we can hold out hope for that. But if not, I don't think that having a subtle change in numbers between the two different kinds of gameplay would be a terribly bad solution. I think it would get the job done, and right now, for most players, that's probably what they're concerned with. Anyway, that is it for the Q&A. If you've got any questions of your own, please leave them down in the comments of the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.